I'm excited to be with everyone today. And first off, before I introduce myself and before we get started, I just want to make sure everybody has the right tools. And this is a very simple lesson today. And so you could do it with just a number two pencil. So if you have one of these and with an eraser or with one of these erasers, I tend to like my kneaded eraser. If they ever open Michael's again, these aren't very expensive. These are very inexpensive. Anyway, they don't leave all those little erasing hairs. So I do like a kneaded eraser, but any eraser will work. Of course, paper, just a couple of sheets of white paper. I do have art paper with me today, but if you don't have that and you have type paper, that works perfect. So if you have a back of an envelope, if you have blank paper in a notebook, all of that works. We will be blending a little bit today. I wanted to show you a little bit of that. I sometimes use my finger and I get a mess, but that's okay. I do have these really fun blendy tools. If you have any of those, those will work. But this will work really great too. Just a regular Q-tip. And then again, if you have a sharpener handy, so just in case you need it. Sometimes what I like to do is make sure I have enough pencils so that I don't need it. But one handy if I do. Now you'll notice I have a blue one here. It doesn't have an eraser. This is an art pencil, but if you'll notice it has a number 2B on it as well. So that's B is for bold. It's just a number 2 pencil. If you have a set of these, you can get them upwards of, like, there's a 4B and then there's a 6B. So they just get darker and darker as you go up. And then they also have hard ones, but make sure you have a number 2 pencil. And then just, we're going to be drawing this today. But before we do that, I'm going to head over here to this easel, introduce myself a little bit and what we're going to be doing today. Okay, just do this. Okay, hopefully you can hear me. Welcome. My name is Jamie Naluai. I have lived in the area for about 14 years. And the first thing I did when I got here was I went over to the local library, which is in Lexington Park. And I said, let me paint a mural for you. And they said, sure, let's do it. So if you've ever been over there, I've done a couple murals for them. And that's just how I got established in the community. I now teach art over at the Senior Center at Chancellor's Run Road. I've done some over at the Garvey Center in Leonardtown. And I'm also artist in residence through St. Mary's County Public Schools. So maybe you've seen me through there. Anyway, so this is my favorite thing. I've been teaching art since I was in high school. My art teacher, when I was a senior, said, hey, do you want to teach art? I said yes. And I had 10 little 9-year-olds after school on Tuesdays and Thursdays in Parks and Rec. And that's where I started. So I love teaching. So welcome today. I'm excited to have you here. So what we're going to talk about today is the basics. And maybe you already have the basics, but it's always good to go over them again, especially if you just want to up your game, if you want to get better at it. And some people I know are really, really scared. So the first thing that I would give you advice on is just be confident. Be confident in that you can draw. A lot of people say to me, I just can't draw. I wish I had the talent of art. And I always tell them that if you are given the right tools and the right instruction, anybody can do it. And I truly believe that. So first off, when you get your pencil, I'm actually going to, on this easel today, use a Sharpie marker. Don't do that on your pen, on your paper today, but I want you to be able to see this. So get your Sharpie mark, get your pencil out. But this is with any exercise. If you're going to run a marathon, you're going to exercise. If you're going to play the tuba, you're going to practice. So with anything like this, you're always going to practice. So what I want to just go over a couple of things on this board for you is basically how to use your arm and your pencil to be the right tool for you. So when we write our name or we do our little signature, we get really, really close to this end and we get really, really tight. And our hand is almost like in a fist, and we sign our name nice and close, however you do it. But when you do that in art, then everything looks tight. And then you don't get the movement that you want. So you really want to loosen up a little bit. So what I like to do is I like to back off. So maybe there's about an inch of your pencil here, you back off. And then I know a lot of people like to use their wrists when they sign their name, right? You think that it all comes from here. And a lot of it can. Like if I wanted to do some fun line work that goes like this, notice I'm bending right here, okay? So and I can get some line work like that. But if I'm trying to get line work and I'm just using my fingers, then I see a lot of people have a tendency to just kind of do that sketchy line where I want a nice one right here. But when I draw, I actually come from my shoulder. So I keep my wrist steady, I keep my elbow steady, and I just use my wrist, or I just use my shoulder. When I use my shoulder when I draw, I get a whole lot more movement, and I can actually control it a little better. And I want you to practice that. So after you do this drawing lesson with me today, I want you to just take a pencil anytime that you have a free moment, and I want you to just kind of practice some lines. I want you to notice what happens when you draw a line straight down just using your wrist and your fingers. And then watch what happens when you use your arm and you pull it down. You have a lot more control. What if you're trying to draw a circle, right? And maybe you can do it like this, but I feel like when I use my wrist and I try to draw that circle, maybe I don't have enough control. But if I use my whole arm, and you see how I'm just rubbing this right against it, I'm pretty loose, and I start doing my circle, notice I get a better circle shape, right? And it's because I'm using my whole arm. So lines are the things that tell us the story. Lines show us direction. Lines show us volume. Lines show us shapes. Lines can tell a story. So I could do a line here, and I can do a line right next to it, and I can do a line right over there. And those are just lines. Anybody can do those. But what happens if I take this and I add a circle line to that one, and I add half a circle line to that one, and then I go right across? Well, then I just used a word, right? So let's take this round shape that I just used, and now let's use some lines, and maybe we draw a line right down the middle, right? But what happens when we start taking from that top and that bottom, and we start drawing some lines that go around, right? And we have these directional lines, and that tells us a story too. That all of a sudden tells us that this is not flat, that this is maybe a ball or a piece of fruit. And let's say we want to put a shadow to it. I bring some lines out, and notice they're all stemming from that middle, and I just use some direction. And now I see that it's sitting on something. So don't forget your line work. Lines can tell a story. But when we do lines, okay, so let me give you another example. This is a fun one. And I want you to try this. Get one of your pieces of paper out. I want you to try these lines with me. I want you to start practice some of these movements with your hands and your arms. And I want you to just start getting the feel of it. See how your circles go if you use your whole arm. See how your lines go if you use your whole arm versus just your wrist or your fingers. I want you to try that as I do this. And you can draw as many as you want, and over and over and over again to just get that. It's like doing your scales on the piano over and over, right? So here's something. So let's just, let's do, maybe I have a line here, and maybe I have a line here, and then I have a line here, and maybe that goes this way, maybe that goes that way. And those are just lines. And if you were in elementary school, maybe kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and your teacher gives you a piece of paper that has these lines on it, and you start, and he wants you to color it in. You know, we see these kids that, and there's nothing wrong with this, right? We learn that kids will just fill the space, and how do they fill it? They just fill it, right? They just want that space to be full. And they'll come up here and they'll just fill that space. And we have a lovely, we don't know what, right? So the thing to ask the child is, tell me about your picture, not what did you draw? So that's a hint. But they will just scribble it in, and that's something that they have to learn. So we take the same drawing, and there's maybe one here. We have a line here and one here and here. And now we add some lines to it. What happens if we just start adding some horizontal lines here, right? And what if we add now some lines here, right? Now we can see that maybe it's a path down a rocky canyon, or maybe it could be, and you could take some of those lines and move them back and forth, and now it could be a river. So we see that lines make up what we're going to do. And we're going to take those lines today, and I'm going to teach you how to make outlines versus edges. Also, we're going to take those lines and we are going to make them into basic shapes, shapes that everyone knows. And then we're also going to take these lines and we're going to shade them, okay? So I'm going to do one more thing right here on this easel, and then we're going to move, and then move over there. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to show you is that you can take any picture, and well, first I want to explain the difference between an outline and an edge of something. And this, I'm actually going to use my pencil. So I'm going to go in here with a darker pencil, and hopefully you can see this. Hopefully I'm close enough. You know, I have this set up in my basement. I wish I was a professional studio, but this is what we get. So hopefully you can see me. And I'm going to start out with, I'm going to draw a can, just a can. I can start with that circle at the top. When you first start to draw, I would like you to press very lightly. I can't even express that enough, because we all have a tendency, all of us, even I, to have a heavy hand. When we're drawing, when we're writing, when we do our ABCs, when we're writing a note, anything, we just have a heavy hand and we draw dark, okay? And so that's easy to do, to draw dark. And so I want you to also practice when you're doing your lines. I want you to practice using a light hand, a light touch, a light sketch, okay? But for the purposes of you being able to see this, I am going a tad bit dark. And then I take my arm. I want you to notice I'm using my shoulder here, and I'm just going to draw that line down here, and I'm going to draw that line down here, okay? And then because I'm trying to mirror this curve right here, I'm just going to take it right here. So basic column shape, okay? And I can see that it has some dimension to it. Now we're going to talk a little bit about shading and what happens when we shade. Now you can hold your pencil when you shade, and you can just do lines, right? You can just do that in lines, and you can get a little lighter, you can get a little darker, you can get a little lighter. But watch what happens when you take your pencil and you move this to the middle of your palm. And now you have an edge, and you can go from dark to light to dark again, and it is much smoother. And you can do either one, both of them, depending on what your picture is. but I tend to like this one. And then I can always take my lovely finger here and I can blend it if I want to. Okay, so now we have this shape and I want you to practice this with me. Okay, so draw your little shape here, and Tori, doesn't have to be perfect. I just want you to kind of get that shape in here. And now I'm gonna make sure I know where my light source is. Let's say my light source is coming from this direction. So right back here, I'm going to move my, into the bottom of my pencil into my palm, and I'm just gonna use the edge of that. And I'm going to shade that in, all right? And some of us have a tendency to make sure we know where our lines are. Like, okay, that's the line I want to keep, right? That's the line I want to keep. And again, we get heavy-handed, right? And that's okay if you are making a cartoon. If you're making a cartoon, heavy-handed, but always get your sketches very lightly first. And then I can come in here and I can say, okay, there's a little bit of shadow up in here. Okay. It's a little dark. And now I have lines, I have my basic shape, and I have some shading going on because I know where my light source is. So maybe right down here is the shadow. Okay, something like that. And that right there, drawing 101. Well, this is drawing 101 plus. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing right over here. And I want you to see the difference. So again, I'm just going to lightly sketch that oval. I'm going to take and do my lines. And it doesn't have to be the same size, right? And now, and you can't, maybe you can't see that because I've been doing what I'm telling you. I go lightly, okay? But then I can take and I can find the line I want, and I can go over it just a little bit, okay? But instead of making outlines, because this right here, they're outlines, we're going to try for edges. And edges come when you don't see lines. How do I not see lines? Well, I'm going to erase that line by making my shading the exact same color as that line. Okay. And notice I've got my pencil outside. It's a little bit harder to get that good shading in. So I just switch it to the middle of my palm, and I can come down here and I can shade. Now, hopefully this is going a little easier for you. I'm on an easel. It's a little tricky. So I'm going to cover, I'm just going to keep going here for just a minute. Okay. But now I don't see that line. I do see this one up here. So let's make this dark up here and dark in there. And it can get lighter. Now I don't see those two lines, but I still see this line. How do I get rid of that line? That is where my light source is coming from. So give it a background. So I'm going to take the shading outside of that can. A lot of times we forget that things aren't floating out there in space. They have to have a place that they're at. Are they on a table? Are they in a hand? Are they on the bench? Are they, you know, wherever they're at, there is a background to it. And we take that shading, right? And we give it, and it doesn't have to be as dark, right? And it doesn't have to be perfect. I want you to go and look up just artists, any maybe classical artists you can get on a Google or Bing or something, and just images. And I want you to notice how they get rid of their lines, how their backgrounds look. I want you to research that. Take a look at what they've done, and you'll notice that these backgrounds erase all those lines, right? Maybe we go a little darker down here. So same exact thing, right? Cartoon, outline edges, and all of a sudden when we take those out, when we take those and make all of those edges real edges by erasing the lines with the shading, then we actually have an object that looks more 3D. So I encourage you to practice that. And then you can always take your lines and you can make, these are contour lines that just show us more of what we're seeing. And then next week, we're going to get into detail lines. Okay, so that's basic Art 101. We've talked about lines and how they tell a story. We talked about shading, basic shapes. And now we're gonna go over to my desktop and we are going to draw. Okay. So hopefully you have all of your stuff here. I gotta make sure. Okay. Now, just get your, one thing else that I like that I didn't mention, that if you have handy sometimes, maybe a tissue. And it's not so that you can cry over your work because it's not turning out the way you want it to. It's actually very useful, especially when you're using pencil. Already the back of my hand has gotten dirty, and sometimes I like just putting something there. You can put an extra piece of paper there as well. My fingers get dirty already because I've been smearing stuff around. So the first thing we're going to do here is I'm going to teach you a little bit about how to look at an object and how to pick out your basic shapes. Because when I show classes, oh, look at this, we're going to draw this today, or we're going to draw a rose, or we're going to draw the face, or we're going to draw this boat, or whatever it may be, and they get this panicked look in their eye like, I can't draw that. And so my biggest thing is, if you know your basic shapes and you know how lines connect, and you do because you know your ABCs, then what you get is you put them together like a puzzle. So anybody can pick out the basic shapes and then you can put it together like a puzzle. And so I'm just going to take this piece of paper right here, and I'm going to do it the same way as this. So this is portrait. If you want, you can do it landscape. It's up to you. We're going to talk about composition and balance next week. So, but today we just want to get our line work in, and I want to show you how easy it is to take basic shapes and put them all together. And we're going to use, so I'm going to go back here to my pencil, and it needs to be sharpened. So I'm going to quickly just go over here and sharpen it a little bit. Okay. And so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to use my pencil. This right here is not only the best tool for drawing, to be quite honest, it's like the best tool overall, because I can use this as a measuring stick as well, because all lines are relative to another line. Just like I showed you when we did the word art, I had to put, here, let's do that one again. I put one here, and I put one here, and I put one taller here. So they're all relative to each other, right? So that I have enough room to do that, I have enough room to do that, and I have enough room to do that. And I want it to fit in a space. So all these lines over here and these shapes have to fit within the space. So I'm going to use my pencil here, and I'm just going to measure it. Okay, so I can take my pencil, and whatever pencil you have, I want you to just put it right up to that screen, and I want you to measure it with your pencil. Now, if something's not close to you, and we'll practice this another time, you can hold your pencil up and look far away, and you can use your thumb to say, okay, that's far away is about this length. That's tricky to show on this screen, so we're just going to stay right here. But this lantern is a full pencil length and then a little bit. And you can't see that with that pencil very well. So maybe I'll switch over. Okay, there we go. There you can see it really good. So the top of my pencil to where this green is where the length of that is. And so I can just come right over here and I can do that. I can just I'm going to start right here with my little round. Now this is a basic shape, right? Here's my little basic shape. And if you look at this, just take that apart and you're just going to draw it, right? Basic shape. So I know that this is about going to be the top. Okay. And then remember I said, okay, it's going to go from there to there. So I can put my little finger there and I can just say, okay, that's where it ends. And I know that it ends with a line that goes something like that. Okay. And we're drawing it like one for one, right? If you wanted to make this smaller, you can still do the same thing. And I'll show you how. You can say, okay, relative to the length of my pencil, that's how long this is. Okay, so where is where's the width at that? Okay, so I can turn my pencil around and I can say, oh my goodness, the width of that is basically half. It's half. So it is going to be this, and then you divide that in half right here. You put your little finger right there, and then you're going to say, okay, it's going to right there and right there. And I've just used my pencil as a tool to help me measure that. Okay, so if you wanted to go smaller, just make sure that whatever this length is, whether it's 2 inches or 1 inch, you just half it, and that's going to be your width. And then you start with your basic shapes. So I know where it's supposed to be at the top. I know where it's supposed to be at the bottom. This is kind of the middle of my, let me just kind of draw like a guideline, right? Notice you can barely see that. I can barely see that. This is how light I want you to draw, okay? And then I have my guidelines over here. Remember, that's half the size. And then what I do is I'm going to start with some of these shapes I know at the top. Okay, and I know that this bulb shape right here, this bulb right here is not quite half of my pencil. Okay, so I'm going to back it off a little bit, half the size, right? So you can take your pencil, put your little thing there, and I can just say, okay, it's going to come down about that far, and I know that it's going to be that length, and I can just start with that shape. So I'm going to use all these lines and basically take them apart and measure them and say, where do they belong? Okay. How tall is this base? This base is supposed to be this tall. Did I get it right? Guess what? I didn't. It should be about right here. Okay. And you can erase, right? Make sure. I've had people come to me and this one lady, she's like, I've been trying to draw my grandchildren and I have these pictures of them and it just doesn't look right. And I don't know if you've ever done this where you've drawn something, a bird or a flower, and it just doesn't look right. And then I tell them, well, go measure it. How do you measure it? Take your pencil and just measure those spaces. And sure enough, usually those spaces are off, especially with the face. When we talk about the face, it really is all about math. I'm sorry to tell you that. I don't do math myself. I married math, but math has to be involved somehow, right? And this is the easiest way for me to use math is I just measure it. So I know that that is right here, okay? And I know that halfway between those two areas is another line that goes this way, right? And then I can just start using these shapes. So let's just start here at the bottom and I'm just going to use this shape. I'm going to say, okay, that's a nice, beautiful shape. And I'm using my whole arm. I'm not using my wrist. When I start using my wrist, that shape is just not going to look good. Okay. So use your arm. Okay. And then I'm going to move up and I'm going to say, okay, I know that there's this shape underneath it. Right. It's like a rectangular shape. And then right above that, well, there's this dome shape. Okay. And then if I want, I can start putting in that little round thing right there. Okay. And it's got some other round things. And I'm just taking everything apart, bit by bit, line by line, shape by shape. And if you don't look at it as a one solid thing, you will not get overwhelmed. I promise you. And if you keep practicing this, take a picture of your favorite bird or your favorite animal and break it down into shapes. And you'll be surprised when you're measuring how easy it can come together. Okay. So now we're going to get to this next shape. And this next shape is this oval right here above this little knob. Okay. So I'm going to take that shape right there. Now, what I'm going to do is now I've got some shapes going on here. I'm going to make sure my measurements are right. So I'm going to take this little shape here. I'm going to just say, did I get that right? Oh, look at that. I got that right. Right? That's exactly right. Now, did I get it far enough away from this edge? Let me look. So I'm going to measure. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to measure it. And I'm going to say, close enough, right? I can bring this in just a little bit. And then, of course, I'm going to want to do that to the other side, right? So, and then what I don't want, I can erase. That's why we draw lightly, so we can erase whatever we need to, okay? Sarah or Jeanette, I'm going to need you to give me like a heads up on timing here because I could talk forever. You poor people, I could talk forever. Yeah. So just maybe.
So it's 1:37 now.
Okay, and I'm going to 2:30, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. And I didn't mention this to you, but what we're going to do at the very tail end, if you could give me a heads up that we have 15 minutes left, we're going to stop recording. And then what I'd like you to do is I'd like anybody who's willing to show us what you got. Sarah will manage that. She will figure out, and I want to say thank you to her. She's from the library and she is helping, let's see, Sarah Stevenson, that's her name. She's helping run this Zoom meeting today because I am not that tech savvy. So thank you to her. And but give me a heads up when it's 15 minutes after 2, and then we can stop recording. And if anybody would like to share theirs, I think that that's been the hardest part about me doing these over Zoom is I don't get to be with people face to face and just see what you're doing and what you're working on. And if you do have any question, there is a chat function hopefully in your Zoom, and if there's a question somebody that pops up, they will let me know and I can answer it. So if you have any questions, please use that tool. Okay, so let's get back to this. Now let's take a look at some of where these lines connect, right? I think that that's kind of our biggest problem, is that our brain loves to take over. Our brain is so smart and it likes to take shortcuts. It's very, very easy for our brain to say, I know exactly what I'm drawing. I know that a lantern looks like that. I know that it needs to have a bulb. I know that it needs to have a base that's taller or bigger or wider. And so what we do is we let our brain take over and we just run with it. And we start doing lines and start making things, and we forget to measure. And also, I'm actually doing an observational drawing right now. I'm observing it and I'm drawing it one line at a time, one shape at a time. And so what I do is I look at this one and I draw something, and I look again and then I draw something else. Because if I just stay on this right here and I just go for it, my brain is going to mess me up. It will every time. It's a beautiful thing because now I don't have to figure out every morning how to dress myself. My brain already knows how to do that. But while I'm learning to draw, and even though I've been doing this for over 25 years, I still need to stop my brain from trying to take over. I need to look at something and I need to see where it's relative. So I know that this comes down here and I know that it's going to hit somewhere right here. All right. And I know that it's that line, there's going to be a half, it's only half of this space. Okay. So I take that line and it goes somewhere like that. Okay. And then I'm going to come over here and maybe this side isn't the same. So take a look at it, make sure, right? comes up right here. And again, it is half the space, and it's going to turn, right? Just like that. So now I'm going to get into this space. So now that I know where it lands, it's right here. How long is that? And I'm just going to mark it on my pencil. And I'm going to come over here, and it's going to be a little bit shorter than what I had it. And then I can erase, right? And now I'm back to another shape. And this shape is kind of just like, well, it's like a pear shape, right? Except the top is off of it. So I'm just going to come, I'm going to just sketch in that pear shape. Okay. You can find your lines that you're happy with later. Just go nice and slow and sketch nice and light. Okay, you can always find your lines later. Okay, now we have a series of circles here. And so basically, if I were to just draw this, I could say, okay, the shape here is a column. Okay, and I can just come and I can just cut it like that. And that's great. That's a shape right there. But now I know that shape is also divided into 4 sections. And the top 3 are the same size. 1, 2, 3, they're about the same size. And this bottom one is just a little bit bigger. Okay. And they're also different widths, but I'm just going to start with the shapes that I know. Okay. So I'm going to say, okay, this one's a little bigger. Get your contour line in there. Okay, and then this one has to be divided into 3. So 1, 2 lines to make those 3 spaces. And then this is where I can come in and I can just say, okay, this one's a little bit shorter. This one's a little bit longer. This one's a little bit longer. And then this one comes right down to that edge of that bulb. You notice how that line comes right down, and it's going to connect right with that bulb, and it's going to just find its way right along those edges. And all of a sudden, all of those shapes come together. Okay. And we're not going to, and then you can erase now if it bugs you, but you can erase later. Okay. So whenever you're ready to erase, because maybe those lines are distracting you, you just get the feel of what it's going to do to you, okay? However it makes you feel. And then we're going to take this, and it's got a rim to it. And maybe it's a little flatter than what I drew. And then it's got a rim. And then it's got this little knobby right on top. Notice I still have this line straight down the middle. This is a symmetric piece, right? So what is done on one side usually is done to the other. I want you to practice drawing with things that are symmetric like this. And I also want you to practice things that aren't. Something, you know, a jar and a cup are very easy. A tin can is very easy. But you could take a leaf from your garden. You could take a seashell. You could take anything that you want, and you can practice all these lines. Okay, so this is a very symmetric shape, so that's easy. I have this line down the middle to kind of guide me. Okay, so now I'm not quite done. Now I'm going to try to finish off these edges right here. So then I'm going to come up here and I'm going to look, where do those lines connect? And they are right in between this one and this one, same side. Same on both sides. So they come out this way. And then there's just an angle to them. And I sketch that down. And making sure I stick with, right. Notice how when I sketch, I do a bunch of lines over the top of each other. When you do that, you're of course practicing your lines, and you're going to find your right one. But what I want you to start doing is I want you to start being confident with your lines. So if I know that this line starts here, and I know that it ends here, and I know it's just a straight shot down, and I already have this line to guide me, I want you to try to do it without the sketching. I want you to just go for it. I want you to try it. I want you to just take your arm, make sure you're bending from your shoulder, and you're just pulling your arm through, and you're just going to do, instead of a bunch of little lines, you're just going to be strong, and you're going to come down, okay? And you're just going to meet that up. And I look at this and I actually like that line a lot better than this one even, because when you're sketching, you're doing a bunch of little lines, and I like this one even better because I was confident in it. So I want you to have some lines in this that are confident lines, okay? Not just sketchy lines, but confident lines. Okay, and then I know it starts here, and I know that it ends here, and I know that I have this line to guide me, so I'm going to be confident again. And I think, well, you know what, that's a better line, and this made this really thin, so I can always come and move that out a little bit and thicken it, okay? I want you to remember that whenever you're drawing something, and you love it, and you think, oh, I'm going to frame it, or maybe you don't love it. Maybe it's one of your practice sheets. Date it and see how well you get, you know, keep practicing. Maybe you have an art journal that you can flip through, and you date everything, and you flip through it a year, and you think, oh my goodness, look at me. I've gained so much. I've learned so much. But nobody, unless you paste this right into the book next to this, no one's going to see the inspiration piece. No one. Only you have seen it, right? Unless it's a portrait of your child, right? But even then, you're probably not going to put them right next to each other, okay? So whenever I'm drawing something where I've been inspired by a picture or something that I've taken a picture of, or even a 3D object, nobody's going to see it. So if this isn't perfect, nobody knows that. Nobody knows that but you, okay? So if you're looking at this and you're looking at this and you're thinking, it's just not right. I think this still looks like a lantern. What do you think, right? And then you go from there. So nobody's going to question that this isn't a lantern, hopefully, okay? Okay, so let's do our last little lines here. And these are, you know, they've got some lines here. So take it just take it line by line, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pencil again, and I'm just going to measure this, okay? From the top of that little curve to there, and I'm going to lay that down. And I know that that's where it starts, okay? I give myself a little point, and it's right. It follows that guideline right down the middle. And then I'm just going to draw it. Now I know based on what I'm looking at, it follows very close. Where it starts to curve is the edge of that right there, okay? So you can give yourself another guideline, right? You can give yourself another guideline. And it only comes down to about there. Almost like you just did a little house on the top right here, right? Swoop, swoop, okay? And then I know that it comes and it curves and it goes down right next to the edge of that. See that very, not very much. And that's where it now curves out. And there's these little dots that are connecting it, and those little dots happen to be in the middle. If I were to go over in the middle of this section here, okay? Again, where do my lines, where do things connect? And it really is taking it apart. And I know that that is where it's going to come out. So all I have to do is come like that and out. And again, erase, find the line. There we go. Voila, what do you got there? Hopefully you have a drawing very similar to this. Hopefully you've made some of your lines light enough that you can erase them if you wanted to. Hopefully you like the look of it. Again, this is a practice piece. I am going to come back in and make sure some of my lines that I like, I keep. Okay, this is where you can get a little bit darker on your lines. Find the line you like and keep that line, okay? And then down here, there was, right at the top, there's kind of like this hole in there. Of course, right where, and this wasn't necessarily a perfect circle. It has ridges on it so you can turn it. So I'll let you figure out, maybe I can just pick this up a little bit and show you without zooming. I just want you to see some of these details. So around that little curve there and inside of here, what it kind of looks like. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? It's just, so now comes the part where we can keep it as an outline, or we can practice doing edges. And remember what I said about edges. If we take and get rid of the lines, then what we have is an object that's a little bit more 3D, okay? So this might be the time where you want to get either tissue or another piece of paper or something that just kind of lay right here. Now, if you're a lefty, you're going to start at the top of the right-hand corner and you're going to come down this direction, okay? This isn't like writing. This isn't like I've got to angle it and I'm going to smear all across. This is the lovely thing about drawing if you're a lefty, is that you can start wherever you want on the page and come this way, okay? It doesn't have to follow. And here's another thing I want to just remind everybody. This is not stationary. This is like a move it around. This is a, you can flip it upside down. Whatever's more comfortable for you as you start filling it in and as you start drawing it, okay? And maybe I should have showed you that, but so I can get, maybe I can get this line really good, but I'm really struggling with this side. I could have, if I'd wanted to, flipped it over, and now I'm doing that same angle. Maybe getting that angle is easier, like that. Notice comes down like that, comes down like that. So maybe that's easier for you, okay? Don't ever feel like you need to keep this like that, okay? Or straight up. It doesn't have to, oh my goodness, right? That's the lovely part about art, is you can make a mess. You can move it however you want. You can move from this direction to this direction, or here to there, and you can be a disaster. And I remember I was wearing my painty clothes one day, and my daughter had just come home from first grade in her uniform, nice uniform, I might add, when she left that morning. And I looked at her and she had paint everywhere on her clothes. And I just, oh my goodness, honey, you ruined your clothes. You are a mess. What did you do? How dare you? And then she just looked at me and I was in painty clothes. And yeah, art's fun, isn't it? So get a little dirty if you need to. And you can erase, right? If you get in here and you get messy and you need to erase, go right ahead. Okay. So now I'm going to start right up here, and I like to start at the top so that it doesn't get all smeary on the way down. And this is where I just start taking, and I know that this is a thicker line here, so I can just darken that in, right? And if I wanted to, I could come right in for more control, and I can just darken that in, okay? So we're going to just spend the rest of the time getting some of these areas darkened. And notice on some of these sharper edges, I'm holding my pencil like this. as opposed to inside of my palm. And that's up to you, whatever you're more comfortable with. You'll get it when you start doing some of these bigger areas, but if you want a little bit more control on some of these smaller areas, you go right ahead. And again, this is an observational shading as well. Whenever I start shading, I like to give myself my light source. Now I can obviously see that the light source from here is probably like straight down, because I've got like, you can see it's lighter up here. You can see that it's lighter right here. You can see it's lighter right here. So the light source is about right here. Does that mean you have to do your light source there? Well, if you're using this as an example, then go ahead and do exactly what they did. Then you can practice it. But if you want to put it somewhere else, you can. I just like to give myself somewhere on this sheet, like a little arrow, just a nice little arrow. Okay, my light source is here, or my light source is here. Or even if you wanted your light source here, just so you know where it's coming from, so you don't get confused, okay? So then I can start coming in here. I'm gonna switch pencils. And I'm gonna give myself, I don't want those lines, remember, so I'm gonna shade everything in. And notice this is the inside of my palm now because it's a bigger space, right? And this is darker, okay? And then around this edge, it's gonna be darker. Just right there. And right over here. And this is where you can come in with your Q-tip. You can kind of smear it in. I tend to smear it in while I go, just so I can see where I want to add some more color to it. Okay, you can color it all in first and then start smearing things around, but I like to do it this way. That way I can see what I want to darken next, okay? Or if I need to get rid of a line somewhere, or I need to add a little bit more, like right here, I want to add a little bit more dark, okay? And then I'm going to come down here. And so next week, what we're going to do is we're going to do more drawing, but we're going to talk a little bit more about contour lines and detail lines. As you can see, the lines here are just kind of more of my outline edge lines. There's not a lot going on specifically in this that would give it a texture. You can see a little bit of striation if you look really closely in here because it's a metal, and we don't need to do that with a line yet. We can just use that with shading. But next week I'll give you something that has a lot of texture to it, a lot of detailed lines, so that you can start getting used to how to make your pencil work in that regard as well. Okay. And because these are all about the same size and same color and same shading, I am going to do them all together. And notice my shading is going in the same direction as my lines. If I started shading and I was like doing it this way, it just wouldn't have the same feel. Okay, so it's almost like when they tell you to when you're painting or staining something to go with your grain lines, I like to go with my contour lines. So whenever I'm shading something, I try to stick with my contour lines. So I'm going the same direction. And it's a lot easier to just fill it in that way, okay? And I'm leaving some spots that are lighter. All right. But what happens if I fill this in and I just didn't get enough of a highlight where I wanted it? Well, that's what this is for, right? An eraser. You can always come in and you can hit it like right here. I want a little bit more highlight there. Or maybe I want a little bit highlight right there. Okay, and you can always come back in and do that later. So that's why we always have like these really good erasers. Okay, and then I'm going to just continue down. And I want you to notice, do you see any lines in there? There's not a whole, you can't see the outlines as much, right? I've hidden them with my shading, and I really want you to practice that. This idea that you don't have to outline things for it to be there, okay? You just shade it in. Okay, so now I can take my, and notice, you know, this is already black right here, okay? So if I'm in an area where I want a little bit of shading and I don't really want to put my pencil to it, guess what? I have like a perfect amount on the end of my thing already where I can just smooth it out. Look at that. It's just residual blackness that is going to help with the edge of this container. Isn't that cool? I don't even have to do anything. I can just come in with my dirty Q-tip and dirty from pencil lead, right? and I can just get those really fun shapes in there. Notice I'm going the direction of that bulb, right? So now I can do that, and then I can come back in here and I can just start smoothing these out. Now, if you have one of these blendy tools, it's good because you see how tight that is. You see how sharp that is. Nice and sharp right there. And so when it has a nice sharp edge, you can really get into those crevices. That's why I would recommend getting some blendy tools. So if you're going to start drawing, or if you just love drawing, I really would recommend the four things that I would recommend that you have, and they don't cost very much at all, is get yourself a notebook, and it can be a 5x7, it can be an 8x10. I have this is mixed media, but you can get ones that are drawing, the Bristol paper that's nice and smooth. And I like this because if you wanted to ever, you could use a pen in it or a marker in it instead of just a pencil. But get yourself a really nice book, and then get yourself a good set of pencils. And you can get these, you can even get these at Walmart, I think. But they come in a variety of like 2B, 3B, 4B, 6B, whatever. And then they also have hardnesses. So get yourself a nice set of pencils. But if you don't do that, then get yourself a nice, good #2 pencil. But get yourself these blendy tools, a kneaded eraser, and you've got your paper, your pencil, your kneaded eraser, and your blendy tools, and you're set to go. You can be sitting at the park, and you could sketch the slide, or you could sketch a bird, or you could sketch your child going down the slide if you're fast enough, right? But it's always, that's why I love drawing so much, is because it's a very easy get up and go kind of a thing, right? You can do it while you're sitting, I was going to say at the doctor's office, but we don't go there anymore, right? Or we could do it while we're sitting waiting in line to get the kids from school, which we don't do anymore. Or at the airport, which we don't do anymore. But anyway, but this is something you can definitely do in all those spaces when they come back. But it is also definitely something you can do sitting at home, sitting in the backyard now that the weather's gotten much better. And notice I'm just blending these all in. Now, if I lose some of my highlights, I can just come in here and I can just erase them up. Okay, so moving on. I wanted to show you the difference. Now, let me just do it right here between these pencils. Well, I've got you here. You can keep doing this, but I wanted to show you these. These are pretty cool. This is a 2B. This is my 2B. Yeah. There's my 2B. You see that? Okay. And this is my 4B. And here's my 6B. And that's the same amount of pressure. Notice that you get the 6B is bolder. So I love it having those different ones because I can come right down here and instead of pushing really, really hard with my 2B, I can come in here with my 6B, right? And I can just fill that in. Nice and dark. Without a whole lot of working, right? Let the tool work for you instead of you work for the tool, okay? So maybe what I should have done is this first, right? So then since it's a little bit darker, I mean, since it's up here, I don't want to. Nice and close. This is where when you find the line, you can sketch that line a little bit because you're just getting rid of it with some color. So notice I am using a little bit of those sharp, you know, back and forth movements, right? Nice edge. Again, in the same direction as the lines. And then sometimes what I like to do is I just like to hold it up and I like to move it away from me. It gives me a chance to just kind of look at it from far away, really just take a look and see if it's what I want. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll close my eyes and then I, you know, take it far away from me and then I'll open my eyes and just take a look at it and see, oh, okay, there's a spot there that needs something. There's a spot there that needs something. Always look at it from a different angle. And after I close my eyes and I open them again, it really just brings back into focus. And that's when you can pinpoint some spots that you think, well, I needed to work a little better on that spot, or I need to work a little better on that spot. Okay.
Jamie, it's 10 after, so you have about 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes, perfect. I hope you guys are getting close to being done with this. If not, I want you to remember that everybody works at their own pace, right? I want you to not feel bad if you're like, well, I didn't get that far. I have some amazing artists in my senior class, and one lady that just zooms through everything, which she's a lot like me. She's been doing it for a long time. She zooms through everything. And then I have another lady who just takes her time and just does some beautiful, beautiful line work and beautiful sketching because she just takes her time and she likes doing it that way. So there's nothing here that says that you cannot, that you have to be done at a certain time, that you have to be fast at it. Of course, you know, my son is playing the piano, and of course, you know, he has a song that he loves and he's played it over and over and over again. And now, of course, he can just zoom right through it. But when he first learned it, of course, he wasn't zooming through it. He was really, really slow. So, and then there's some songs that you just have to be slow at regardless, even if you want to go fast, right? So maybe you need to go a little slow in some spots, even if you want to feel like you want to go fast. I want you to notice that even my shading can be a little sketchy in that, you know, I'm just trying to get that color in there, right? Because what I can do, again, is I can just come in and I can just blend all that up. Okay, so it doesn't need to be like a perfect. And I actually hold my blendy tool just like I would a pencil. And I use it just like I would a pencil. And I just blend that all together. Okay, so I'm just going to recap really quick. Before we turn off recording, and then if anybody wants to show theirs, they can. The first thing I want you to remember is how to hold your pencil nice and loose, right? We're not writing our name, except I will right here, right? I can write my name, okay? But I can loosen up and I can pull it about an inch off, and I can just make sure that it's nice and free, okay? Lines tell the story. Which direction are your lines going? Are you scribbling them in, or do they have a purpose? Are they filling it with a volume? Are they giving it a shape? Are they telling you which direction things go? Are they telling you it's a ball or a flat circle? Okay, lines. Also, making sure that whenever you're doing any kind of art, pick out the basic shapes. Pick out the basic shapes and draw them as you measure along so that you can, they fit together. Is this right where that connects? I always use those connection lines, like, okay, where does this come off? It comes off between these two. Don't let your brain take over, because your brain will take over, okay? And then one last thing, when you're doing your shading, make sure it's in the same direction. You can use your finger for blending, even though that's a little messy or not as clean. You can use a Q-tip. A blendy tool works great. And you can come back in and you can add some highlights with that if you'd like. But make sure that your shading is in the direction, again, of your lines and your shapes. Okay, so I think we've gone over lines, holding your pencil, basic shapes, and shading. So the last thing I wanted to tell you is that next week, Wednesday at 1 p.m. Hopefully you can join us for another lesson. We're going to be talking about composition, and composition is where it fits on the paper. Balance between the darks and lights on the page, also contour lines, detail lines, texture, how to get that from a pencil. And let's see, did we have any questions at all? Did any come up? I didn't see that we had any.
It is 2:15 now.
Okay, so hopefully you've enjoyed this introduction to drawing, and maybe you've been drawing for a while. Maybe you've learned something new. Hopefully you take it at your own pace and become confident in who you are and how you draw. And no two people draw alike, which is wonderful. And again, nobody will see your inspiration piece. So voila. It's good, right? And with that, we're just going to turn off the recording. And then if anybody has anything they want to share, they can.